It's no secret that we're in the latter stages of Anderson Silva's career. The Spider had his 44th birthday just last month, and as of now, he has 44 professional mixed martial arts bouts under his belt. Professional MMA fight number 45 is set to go down this weekend when the Octagon touches down in Rio de Janeiro for UFC 237. I've seen a number of different takes on the fight versus Jared Cannonier. ESPN's Brett Okamoto wrote a great piece on Silva this week about what's left to his future and how it ought to be managed. He also made an appearance on Ariel Helwani's The MMA Reporters this week, talking more and expanding upon the subject. I found myself agreeing with a lot of what he had to say. As a longtime die-hard Anderson Silva fan, it was also nice to see someone in the media give the Spider the respect he deserves and talk about him with the reverence that I feel like has been lost on a lot of the fan base in the media over the years. Us MMA fans aren't known for our elephant-like memory spans, but it's sometimes borderline alarming how fleeting our fanfare can be and how quick we are to forget who some of these athletes are and what they mean to the sport. I'm as guilty of it as anyone else when it comes to other legends in the game. A lot of our memories and perspectives on these fighters is so fickle and changes on a whim on a fight-to-fight basis. I think it's a byproduct of a major influx of events and fights that have taken place over the past 8 years or so. It's a lot easier to get lost in the shuffle and pushed out of the spotlight, which is really unfortunate for the Carlos Condits, the Shogun Huas, the Vanderlei Silvas, and the Nogueiras of the world. But nevertheless, Silva is still here, and despite what many people may think, he's still a player in the middleweight division in 2019. Anytime I talk about Anderson, I talk about how I may have a bias because of how big of a fan I've been of him for so long, so I acknowledge that. But the fact is, as per my last episode released before the Adesanya fight, I think people were insane for writing him off like so many seem to be doing, as if his performances that preceded that fight were that of a washed-up, dilapidated has-been who has no business stepping in there against the best of the division has to offer. Silva had an amazing performance in that bout. Is he a speed slower than he was in his heyday? Absolutely. Are his reflexes the same as they were during his title reign? Of course they aren't. But he still possesses the skill set, and as relevant as that point, he still possesses the desire to compete against the best mixed martial artists on the planet, as he's proven by stepping in there against Adesanya, and as he proved by calling out Yoel Romero before he had his first loss in the UFC, during that period of time where Yoel was unquestionably the scariest fight to be had in the UFC. But it's true we're on the back nine, and with just 3 fights left on his contract, I would really like there to be a lot more thought put into his fights in terms of matchups and the profile of them. He deserves that much, and so do the fans for that matter. With that being said, I'm okay with the pairing with Jared Cannonier. It reminds me of Silva's sort of in-between fights he had at light heavyweight during his title reign, when there was nobody that made a ton of sense for him because he just cleared out any and all contenders in the middleweight division at the time. He would jump up a weight class to take on a James Irvin or a Forrest Griffin. Much like the last time he fought on Brazilian soil back in 2012, when he took a short-notice fight against Stephan Bonner and turned out a very memorable and impressive performance. All 3 of these bouts didn't have title implications or necessarily make a ton of sense, but they all delivered entertainment-wise and were meaningful additions to Silva's body of work. Although the circumstances surrounding this fight are not the same as they were back between 2009 and 2012, and Cannonier is the furthest thing away from a name in this sport, no disrespect, it reminds me of those 3 fights for some reason. Anyone who knows anything about Silva knows how important fighting in Brazil is to him. The 2 fights he had in Brazil throughout his UFC career have been some of his most inspired performances, in my opinion. So, although this isn't the most attractive matchup on paper, I think there's a lot to look forward to with Anderson Silva versus Jared Cannonier. And maybe I'm being a little too optimistic and this is a bit too much of wishful thinking, but even if I am, the fact remains. As outlandish as it may seem right now, given the way things are in this sport and how quick landscapes change, Anderson Silva is one emphatic highlight reel finish away from being thrust right into that title picture. And while he may not have the speed and the reflexes he once had to execute it, he still has the ability to pull it off. Don't miss it.